If you've ever picked up 2 bottles of sake using your hard-earned money and you got those bottles back home ready to wine and dine yourself, more than likely, just looking at statistics, and those 2 bottles tasted completely different for better or for worse, and you didn't really understand why, this video is gonna fix that. Because there are 4 different types of sake that most people don't understand, and they're not divided up the way that you probably think. It's not about price, it's not about the region, it's not even about the brand. It's about 2 things: how it smells and how it feels in your mouth. And once you understand those 2 axes, picking a good bottle of sake will no longer feel like a coin flip. Okay, so here's what most people do when they're buying sake. They look at a bottle, they see a bunch of characters and words they don't really understand. They may be able to discern like the polishing ratio, the alcohol content, may be able to understand a region. And what really ends up happening is they basically just guess, or they ask somebody that they think, whether it be somebody that works there or whatever, they ask somebody that they think knows maybe a little bit more than they do, and they just hope for the best. Sometimes this strategy does work, and sometimes it doesn't, but fundamentally, as you can understand, it's pretty much, like I said before, a coin flip. The classification system we're going over today was developed by the Sake Service Institute of Japan, and they're the ones responsible for training and certifying sake sommeliers. They don't care about brand, they don't care about region, or any of the fancy stuff that goes along with the outside stuff of a sake. They care about what's in the bottle, what that aroma is, and what that flavor is. All right, so before we get into the 4 types of sake and really start deep diving this thing, we need to understand the 2 things that this framework is actually measuring. Axis 1 is all about the aroma. Is it very aromatic or is it more understated? Axis 2 is all about the flavor. Is it light or is it more full-bodied? Is it packing a punch or is it more subtle? If you take those 2 axes and cross them, you end up with 4 quadrants, and that's where we get our 4 types of sake. Those 4 types all land within a quadrant, and those quadrants each have their own specific name. For high aroma and light flavor, that's Kun-shu. For low aroma and light flavor, that's So-shu. For low aroma and rich flavor, that's Jun-shu. And for high aroma and rich flavor, that's Juku-shu. And that's the whole map. Now let's break each one down. All right, we're gonna start with type 1, the very fragrant type, Kun-shu. The name itself roughly translates into fragrant sake, and so, like I said, that's exactly what it is. Kun-shu basically sits in the high aroma, light flavor category, and if you watch my previous video on why some sake tastes like water, this is kind of that pocket that it falls into. Big aromas, but understated flavor. And that's the thing that basically ends up surprising people when they try this style of sake, is they get the, big aroma on the nose, and they expect that the palate is gonna essentially be the equivalent, and it's gonna be a big, bold, impact of flavor. And it's usually a lot more subtle than people tend to expect, but it has a nice, clean, crisp, kind of, well packaged palate. And as I already stated in my Why Does Some Sake Taste Like Water video, this is not some fake out or mistake. This is exactly what this style of sake is supposed to be. So what styles tend to fall in this Kun-shu category? Those are typically going to be your genjos and daigenjos, those more highly polished sakes that are gonna have those very, very aromatic characteristics. When do you actually want this style? You want this style when it's all about the sake. You're not trying to maybe pair this with anything too heavy. So something, like shrimp, or something that's not gonna be, overpowering your palate, or just drinking it by itself. It's best when it's all about the sake. Get this chilled, put it in a wine glass, and just enjoy the sake by itself. Is basically the way I tend to enjoy these kinds of styles. Side note, I just want to say I am confidently probably mispronouncing all of these Japanese words. I just want to reiterate, I am not Japanese, obviously. I've only been to Japan once, and I don't have any professional training on this stuff. I've just been learning as I've went through a lot of different bottles, and so I am confidently mispronouncing a lot of words, I'm sure. So just do not take my pronunciation of these words as gospel. I just want to put that out there. All right, moving on to type 2, we're at So-shu. the refreshing sake. This is actually the most common type of sake that people will generally encounter, though obviously most people don't know it by this name. So-shu sits on the light aroma and light on the flavor kind of spectrum. So again, referencing back to why the sake tastes like water, this is square in those crosshairs of, you know, people kind of picking that up. The only thing this doesn't really speak to is the basically the viscosity, but yeah, this is the low aroma and kind of subtle flavor, but this style is very easy to drink. So what sake falls within the So-shu category? Generally speaking, this is going to be your So-shu, so those sake that have rice polishing ratios of basically greater than 60% more than likely. But there are exceptions to this. Sometimes this is really just the style that the sake, that the Toji brewmaster is going for. If you watch my review on the Kubota Junmai Daiginjo, you know that that's a Daiginjo, but it is that what's called a Tanrei, I think I'm pronouncing it right, the Tanrei style, which is that low aroma and subtle flavor kind of style. When do you want So-shu, this specific type of sake? Well, the good thing is you can pair it with a lot of different kinds of food because so much of it is basically meant to be like complementary. It's a background kind of vibe, if you will. You just don't want it to be, you don't want to drink this with something too like expressive, like super flavorful, like probably not like, you know, jerk chicken or something like that. Something with a whole lot of flavor, because then it's really gonna like almost turn this into water on the palate, because it's like your palate is just competing so much with all the other flavors. But you know, just you can pair this with a lot of other foods, just again, nothing too over the top as far as flavor. You can put this in a nice ochoko, or you know, something that you don't need to worry about trying to like funnel those flavors up to your nose. So you don't need to do like a wine glass, because the aroma isn't anything you need to like optimize for with glassware. So just put this in a nice ochoko or, you know, small cup, and just enjoy it with a lot of different kinds of food, really. All right, now let's move on to the third type, Jun-shu, the full body sake. And this is for the people that really want to get all of the stuff that sake has to offer at once in every kind of facet. If Kun-shu type 1 was high aroma, low body, low flavor intensity, Jun-shu is the complete opposite. It's low aroma and high flavor intensity. As already stated, the nose is going to be a bit more muted, but on the palate, because these styles tend to be a little lower or higher on the rice polishing ratio, you're going to get a lot more, not only just intense flavor, but a lot more of the rice character and those umami notes that people really enjoy out of sake. What sake tends to fall in this category? Junmai styles, Kimoto, and Yamahai styles. So the very traditional brewing techniques, but also the sake that have the polishing ratios that are above 60%. And that's why you get those kind of more grain forward notes on the palate with these styles of sake. And as far as the best way to actually enjoy this specific style, Jun-shu is the sake that really rewards experimenting with the different temperatures at which you're gonna try and enjoy these styles of sake. You really should take the time to try and just warm these up and really see how it changes as, you know, more of the flavor and potentially aroma gets unlocked on these styles of sake. And it's because these styles of sake generally have more, you know, impact on the flavor note. You can actually pair these with some more, you know, some more heavy foods, and they're gonna stand up pretty tall. So you enjoy these styles probably warmed up with a lot of different varieties of food, and I think you're really going to be in for a good time with some of my favorite Kimoto Junmais. I've warmed them up, and you won't be disappointed. All right, so now we're at the final type, Juku-shu matured sake. And this admittedly is the category of sake I have the least, and by least I mean pretty much no experience with. Juku-shu is aged sake koshu typically aged for 3 years or more. And that aging starts to change everything about the sake, from the color to the aroma, and then obviously the flavor profile. You start to shift, even regardless of the polishing ratio, from more of those more like bright and fruity notes to kind of more earthy, and I don't want to, you know, skew it and say like, you know, almost like whiskey, but you start to get more like earthy spice, kind of caramel, like along those lines when you start aging sake. Juku-shu overall is just completely different from the other categories because of all the changes that happen when you age it. It just becomes a completely different experience overall. And because of all those changes, it sits right in the space of high aroma and intense flavor. Again, not trying to make this almost seem like, oh, it's becoming whiskey, but you kind of get that. This is the closest of that pure characteristic that you get in aging sake, is it's expressing both at the same time. And it's because it's such a departure from the, you know, traditional sake that this is the really more acquired taste. Juku-shu is a lot more rare and by extension a lot more expensive than most sake, because like anything, when you start aging stuff, that's a lot of resources that you have to allocate and dedicate to, you know, some specific product over time, and not all breweries are even set up to do that kind of sake. This style of sake is, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this style of sake is kind of best enjoyed the same way you'd enjoy like a nice glass of whiskey. You know, you can sit down by yourself in your little corner and just enjoy it, and you can pair it with, you know, things like chocolate and different nuts or like different meats, and you just kind of really take some time to really dissect all of the nuanced flavors that come with this style of sake. After going through these 4 types of sake, you're probably thinking, well, okay, all that's good. Which style is the best? Tell me which one I really need to be looking out for. And as you could probably guess, the answer is not as simple as go for this one. It's a bit more nuanced. There is no best type of sake. It's really just this sake is best for this kind of moment. So there's right moments for right types of sake, and there's wrong moments for, you know, certain types of sake. If I haven't made this clear already, these different types of sake, they don't rank at all. They just have, you know, almost specialties, if you will. And the most important thing is really just understanding what those specialties are, and really then kind of knowing when you need to grab a certain bottle for a certain occasion or certain dish that you're trying to prepare and enjoy a bottle of sake with. If you want something aromatic and delicate, go ahead and get yourself a Kun-shu. If you want something that you're gonna be evaluating life about and mulling over for, you know, 20 plus minutes trying to pick apart different flavors and aromas, go ahead and get yourself a nice Juku-shu. So now that you have all this information, how can you take this and look at a bottle and be able to, you know, discern all of this to make the right buying decision? The short answer is look at the brewing designation from Ginjo, Daiginjo, Hanjo-zo, and everything in between. Generally speaking, if you want a Kun-shu with its big aroma and light flavor, grab yourself a Ginjo or Daiginjo. If you want something like a So-shu with this light aroma and light flavor, look for a Futsu-shu sake. And so those are the sake that have rice polishing ratios of 70% or higher. But the caveat to that is sometimes certain breweries, it's just their style. Again, like with the Kubota Jumai Daiginjo, it's a Daiginjo, so the polishing ratio is 50% or around there. And it's still that Tanrei style, that crisp, clean finish style. So there are exceptions to these, but this is just the general rule of thumb. If you're into more of the Jun-shu style, that's the low aroma, high flavor style sake, look for a Jumai sake, and that's where the rice polishing ratio is anywhere from 69% all the way to 61%. Or you can look for any sake that has Kimoto or Yamahai in its name, and that'll pretty much be the same style of sake. If you want something aged, that Juku-shu category, you're not gonna be just randomly walking around more than likely and run into one of these kinds of sake, but it'll be a lot more obvious that this is an aged sake, just like with whiskey where the age statement is pretty obvious. On aged sake, they make it pretty obvious that this is an aged sake, and so look for that kind of language on the bottle if you really want to get into that kind of style. If you're at a restaurant and you want to try and pick a specific style of sake and you can't see the bottles all the time, or if you can see them, they're like super far away and all you see are a bunch of kanji, and if you don't speak Japanese, you might as well not be able to see the bottles. But you can just ask the chef there, can you give me something light and aromatic or something full-bodied and savory? And just by kind of narrowing down on those kind of quadrants by speaking that language, they'll understand and kind of get you pretty close to the style that you're going for. One thing I do want to clarify, because I know all of this can get pretty confusing, I have to mentally walk myself back all the time and remind myself as well, is that this axis and these quadrants and categorizations do not replace the flavor map, which is sweet versus dry and light versus rich. Those are completely different ways to look at sake, and they speak kind of different languages as far as what's going on in the bottle. To reiterate, the 4 quadrants are specifically only looking at aroma and body. The flavor map is somewhat looking at body, but it's also looking at basically like the degrees of sweetness. So just in sweet versus dry, that doesn't necessarily overlap with aromatics. So those 2 quadrants aren't really telling you the same thing. So I just want to reiterate that because I know it can get a bit confusing. A Jun-shu can be dry. A Kun-shu can be slightly sweet. The categories give you the framework as far as, again, aroma and body, but the flavor map is going to give you those details. So look at you now. You came into this video thinking sake was just one category with no real way to understand why some bottles were pretty good and others weren't. It was pretty much just a coin flip. Now you have a map of these 4 types of sake, which applies to any bottle you're gonna ever come across, no matter what region or brand or price point. And the sake, it didn't change, but your ability to understand what's going on inside the bottle from the things that are printed on the outside, that's completely changed, and now you're way more informed. I do want to hear from you in the comments. Which of the 4 types that we talked about in this video have you come across the most, or which of the 4 types that you have tried are actually a favorite? I'm curious on what people's experience with these 4 different categories have been, so I'd really like to see that in the comments. I know I've dumped a lot of information on you, but I do want to leave you with one more thing. Did you know that in the West, sake is called rice wine, even though it's not technically a wine? Yeah, it's actually a lot closer to beer than wine because it's not fermented like wine is, and it's not distilled, as we've already discussed, it's not distilled like whiskey. It's brewed like beer. And if you understand a lot of concepts about beer, and as far as like fermentation and hops and all of that stuff, you probably know a lot more about sake than you really thought coming into this video. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next video. I'm going to explain the concepts behind sake using the concepts behind beer, and I'm going to make it way more simpler so you understand sake a whole lot more than you did before. So if that sounds interesting to you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss when that video is live. I'd like to see you there, but until then, we'll keep learning, we'll keep sipping, and I'll see you in the next one. But until then, kanpai.